what's up guys? My name is Zach and today I am driving a 2006 Chrysler 300. Up front is a 2.7 liter V6 and down below is a 4-speed automatic transmission. Now I am super excited to be driving this 300 for two reasons. First of all, it's a first generation 300 which I've never featured here on the channel. I've done a handful of second gens and those are neat and I like those too, but this is the first gen of the 300C. They had other 300 products in the past. It's kind of weird and coming off the cloud cars, it's a little different, whatever. But the second reason is the fact that this is a 300 base, meaning this is not the 300C, which everyone knows and talks about. This is what a normal average base model spec was back in 2006, and I think that there's some interesting points to talk about that comes with that. But if you would like to submit your own vehicle, you can head on over to my website, zackpradel.com/submit. It's a quick and easy submission form. It takes under a minute to fill out, and I come out to you. And huge thank you to Napleton Subaru in Schaumburg for letting me take out this Chrysler 300. You'll hear more about them towards the end of the video, but if you would like to browse their inventory, it's found in the description below. But let's get back to that 2.7 liter V6. Well, that was the base engine offered here, and it makes 190 horsepower. Now, I'm going to talk more about this engine in the final thoughts segment to not bore anyone that's just looking for consumer advice, but this engine was built in Kenosha, Wisconsin, which is not too far from me, so I took a little trip out to the old factory, which I'll share my story with at the end. This engine is not reliable. Some common issues with it are oil sludge issues, because these engines run a little bit hotter than normal, and so they don't get enough oil. They oil starve pretty easily. Water pump will leak into the crank housing, and it's just not a good situation all around. The 2.7 liter wasn't in many vehicles, and there's good reason for it. It's not good. Now, if you did step up to the other, like the 300C, you could get a V8. So you had plenty of engine options in the 300. This just wasn't the best one. Like I said, paired to it is a 4-speed automatic. Very early cars came with the 4 speeds. They later, of course, upped this to 6, and then even later on to 8. It's fine. It's doing the job. I don't love it, but it's propulsing me forward, and that's all I need to do today. Last but not least, of course, the 300 is rear-wheel drive because it is a true American sedan in every sense of the word. How does it feel to drive the 300? Well, that engine is coughing and wheezing just to get me down the road. It's not very happy in its current situation, and why would it be? But other than that, visibility is okay. It does have decently thick A-pillars, very, very early 2000s styling in that way. But the steering is nice and light, the throttle is friendly enough, and the ride is decently comfy even at the base model. So very nice to see that. It got louder, but I didn't go faster. I mean, I could have been at a quarter throttle or full throttle, and that would have felt the exact same. Oh, God, this 2.7 was not destined for this world, and I understand why. With that stuff out of the way, let's talk about the interior. Well, in front of me, I have 4 gauges and a digital readout. Off to the left is my fuel and speedometer, and off to the right is my tachometer and coolant temperature. I also do get that digital odometer displaying the beautiful 57,000 miles on this current example, which is a low mileage version to say the least. On the steering wheel, I don't get anything. Nothing. Zippo. Zilch. Off to the left, I do have a climate control vent, headlight, and dimmer switch, and our trunk release down below. And moving on to the door, we have power mirrors, power locks, and power windows. Moving into the center, we do get an analog clock. Absolutely love seeing these in Chrysler products of the era. As some of you may know, my family owns a 2004 Chrysler Pacifica. Looks very similar to that, so it really reminds me of that. 2 climate vents on either side of that, hazard switch, and ESP off. And then we have our radio. We do have a CD player and aux. Aux is very nice for 2006, but very, very simple beyond that. The green readout is like burned into my memory from the Chrysler products I've had in the past, so it's nice to see that. Down below, we do have our climate control, so off to the left is fan speed and the center's temperature, and off to the right is where to send it. Then we get a shelf, a little pop-out ashtray and cigarette lighter, and then the shifter. shifter. The shifter is a jigsaw style shifter, pretty typical of Chryslers from this era, so not too crazy there. And it functions well, and it actually looks presentable still, even after 18 years, still looks all right. Then we have cup holders. So we will do a big friggin' bottle test here in the 300, and unfortunately it fails. It looks like you could pull this liner out, but I pulled with all my might and it did not come out, so I'm gonna leave it there and unfortunately just give the 300 a fail. Then we do have a center console with some coin holders, 12-volt outlet, and plenty of storage. And then we'll talk about the seats. This was one of the interesting talking points I wanted to make, was that I had no idea that you could even get a Chrysler 300 with cloth seats. I always thought that they came with standard leather, but here, this base model 300 has cloth seats. Quite a rare sight to see. However, speaking of seats, we do have back seats, so let's go do a back seat review. All right, so we're in the back of the base model Chrysler 300 from 2006, and the cloth carries on back here. It is so strange to see. It's like seeing a smoking section sign on a 747. It's just odd. But that's not to say that they're not comfortable. They're okay. They're a little stiff, but I can't imagine many people were riding back here. But legroom great, headroom great. I'm 5'11", not a small guy, and I fit back here. I have a grab handle, I have a light, and all of my necessities, but nothing past that. One thing I do want to note is that it does have rear vents, so I get some type of climate control back here where even brand new Mazda 3s don't have vents for the second row. So interesting note to point. It's pretty base, but they won't make you suffer, and that's a good line to ride. Let's hop out, we'll take a quick look at the trunk and cargo space, and then we'll talk about the looks. All right, we're on the back of the Chrysler 300. Double click here on the key fob, and I heard something happen, just didn't really see anything happen. Oh, it did pop up. And here we go, we have a giant cargo net. But behind that, pretty decent sized trunk. American sedans have always had good trunks, and the Chrysler 300 most certainly follows suit with that. Nothing crazy, exactly what I expected, but that's the trunk space of a Chrysler 300 base from 2006. Now we gotta talk about the looks, and I really love the look of the first generation 300. I always have. I've always preferred it to the second generation. There's just something about it. Honestly, mostly it's just fueled by nostalgia. I was a big Midnight Club 3 fan, and it was on the cover of that. And just growing up in this era, dub culture, Pimp My Ride, this was one of those kind of hot cars at the time. I remember having Hot Wheels and Matchbox of Chrysler 300Cs. I remember seeing them and thinking that they were so cool. They were at car shows and museums, and these cars were very popular. And so driving one here today, it feels like I'm reliving a little bit of my childhood. This color is also called Gold Linen. Sounds like a box you can check when signing up your grandma for the nursing home. But with all that being said, let's get on to my final thoughts. What do I think now finally driving a first generation Chrysler 300? I'm gonna keep calling it the first gen, but you know what I mean. I've really liked it. This car floats and drives a lot nicer than I was anticipating. And that makes sense because it was competing with a lot of other luxury vehicles at the time. But now driving it in this base model spec, I can't say my expectations were exceedingly high. The nice thing about this car, at least to me, is the feeling that I get driving it. This is such a nice, nostalgic experience for me. As soon as I stepped in the car, it smells like older Chrysler products. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the glue they used on the dashboard or the sweat of the workers at the Brampton assembly plant. I don't know, but it smells like home. The pale green lights in here feel like home. The big winged Chrysler logo on the steering wheel feels like home. I took a Chrysler Pacifica to my first ever homecoming. It also plays off of the engine. The engine was built in Kenosha, Wisconsin, somewhere that I actually live fairly close to, and so recently I paid the site a visit. Now, the assembly plant is gone. It no longer exists. Here's a time lapse from Google Earth from the 80s until the 2000s. It was actually bulldozed in 2017. There's just something about Illinois and Wisconsin that feels very homey, even if you're not from here, even if you've never lived in the Midwest. The Midwest always just feels like home base. Life is a little bit simpler than it is in the big cities. and yet it's modern and cozy enough to not be out in the farmlands. And so here I'll show some footage of my little visit to the plant. They actually put up this really nice sign. If you want to pause the video to read it, I will put some screenshots up here. If you'd like to pause, read the whole sign. It has a really cool history in automotive culture. It was owned by Nash and AMC and all these great companies. It was really, really cool to see that. As I drove through Kenosha on my way to and from the plant, it's not a very outwardly pretty town, but it's home. It's the warm embrace of a scratchy blanket. It's not perfect, but it's ours. That's how this car feels. The Chrysler 300 was not a perfect car. Like I said, those engines had issues. Chrysler build quality has never been perfect, and rust issues will always seemingly find a way into your life if you own a Chrysler product, but it's ours. I know that they were assembled over the border in Canada, but this feels like ours. This embodies the Midwest. Detroit, Chicago, Milwaukee, Madison, Cleveland, it just all feels like honest, hardworking folks got together and built a town, and some honest, hardworking folks got together and built this 300. It's one of those unexplainable feelings, but a feeling that I get behind the wheel here today. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Huge thank you to Napleton Subaru in Schaumburg for letting me take out their low mileage Chrysler 300. This is such a cherry of a car. It was awesome to reminisce in this. Napleton Subaru in Schaumburg is wonderful. They always have cool and interesting inventory, and they have great customer service, great deals on new Subarus, of course, and it should be your visit if you're looking for a new vehicle here in the Chicagoland suburbs. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Don't forget to rate the video, comment on the video, and subscribe if you really liked it. Take care, guys.